Hey everyone, Kalendros here. Just wanted to do a video real quick. This one's probably going to be relatively short. Um, this is uh, this is a song from Therion. I've been wanting to do a reaction to Therion. I went back and forth about different songs, and in the end, I ended up just choosing this one, which is actually the song I generally recommend to most people that have never heard Therion before, and it's just a fucking good song is the problem. So, I tend to prefer to do different songs than what I usually would recommend to like reaction channels because I've never heard the band before. But this song is just too good to not do a reaction to, and I certainly did not want to spend a ridiculous amount of time in this video because I'm going to record another video in a little bit here, reacting to this song or reacting to Altaruna Rita Vivia, which was the other song that I was going back and forth with, and the song is just very long, and I probably will do it at some point, but I thought this was a good one as an introduction. And I'm going to try and do the video here. Hopefully we don't get burned again on the video. But, as a consequence, this is going to be a relatively short video. That way, if it does get blocked, it's not so bad. This will also give me a little bit better of an idea about whether I can even attempt to do these videos, ever really. Or whether I just need to just completely stop trying to do videos and just do only audio stuff. So it's a shame that has to be the way it is, but this one's licensed to Warner, not Sony. So we'll see what happens with this one. It's WMG, so that's Warner Music Group. So we'll see what happens. This is off of their Live Gothic DVD, which I actually own. But I can't find it, so I can't do the. Otherwise, I would do the reaction direct from my DVD because the quality would be better. But it is what it is. Unfortunately, it's in 16:9 because this video, when it was released, was 16:9. There was not a whole lot of stuff out there that was high definition. It was some, but not a ton. So, but yeah, the song is called. Hopefully get this pronunciation correct. Ginnungagap, I believe, is the way it's pronounced correctly. But of course, I'm not Swedish, so that could be wrong. And parts of this song are in Swedish, especially at the end of the song. There's a couple of lines that are in Swedish. The bulk of it's actually in English. But there's not lyrically a ton going on, and I'm not going to go through the lyrics, but I'll go through the basics of what the song is really about, at least as far as I can understand it, at the end of the video. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Let me switch cameras here. Okay. All right, guys. So this is Ginnungagap. All right. So that was Ginnungagap. And I chose that song. As you can see, I love that song. So the reason why I chose the live version is interesting because I saw them. Let me get the. There we go. I saw them live. Let's see, twice. Yeah, twice. I saw them live twice. Um, the first time that both times actually, I believe that I saw them. They had the same lineup. I think both cases. Um, no, actually, the first time that I saw them live, they didn't have they. It was right before they got mats, um, and I saw them. Let's see, they didn't have Lori either. Um, Actually, that's what it was. They had mats both times that I saw them, but they did not have Lori the first time. So, because they were touring for the first time I saw them, they had just started to tour for Lemuria and Cirrus B, which was a really really good album. And so that tour they had just gotten mats for that album, and I believe he actually toured with them some on when they were doing Secret of the Runes as well, which was the album before, which is this album. This song is from Secret of the Runes, and the Mats was fantastic, and he was with them through that through all of that album touring cycle, and then all of Live Gothic, the touring cycle, and some subsequent stuff as well. And then he left the band and sort of really created a sort of a downward spiral for them. Really, I've heard the new album is very good, but it's been a while since they've had good material. Like they had this weird French album that nobody likes, and it was a very strange album. They did do Citra Aura, which was a pretty good album. I felt was a pretty good album, which was the first I think they had done without normal album they had done without Mats, and but it wasn't as good as their previous stuff. So they put they had Lori from really from I believe Gothic Kabbalah. Was really right before Gothic Kabbalah, I think, was when she came on board. I know that when I saw them, they had a different singer doing Blood of Kingo and stuff because she was a blonde lady, kind of heavy set, and she wasn't like the front woman that Lori is for the band. When I saw them the second time, they were so good. When I saw them the second time, that was really the pinnacle of their live act, I think, and of their cohesion as a band, because through even Citra Aura, I think they still had the Neiman's, but when they lost the Neiman brothers, I think that really was that hurt, not just losing Mats, but also losing them, because they had been with the band for so long. I mean, because those guys had been with the band since the beginning. So when you lose somebody that integral to the sound, it really impacts the overall sound. But I've heard that the new album, I forget what it's called, something Antichrist, Reluctant Antichrist, or something like that. It's in my backlog of things. I bought it and downloaded it, but I haven't listened to it yet. It's in my backlog of stuff I need to get to. And I've heard very good things about that album, so I'm excited to hear them kind of back again, operating at a high level, because when you look at their output, like in prior to Citra Aura, and even Citra Aura, the way that they compose stuff is so brilliant, and I don't think Christopher gets enough credit for how incredibly arranged this stuff is. Like, Ginnungagap is one that is more of a traditional, almost metal song with operatic vocals and stuff like that, but doesn't have some of the orchestra elements that some of their other songs have. One of the other songs I was looking at doing was Vanaheim, which is one of my personal favorites. It's also from Secret of the Runes, which has a little more classical music feel to it. But in the end, like I said, this song just that middle section with that riff transition is so fantastic and very difficult to play too. That crazy that crazy section is really it's very cool and just obviously very easy to headbang to. And then you have when I saw them live, that song always generated the most crowd reaction. There was always a big pit that sort of developed during that section of the song and really continued because there's another really great heavy riff. So when you come out of that transition, it goes into the part where he's saying, Father Ymer, and then there's like this transition to this like ultra heavy riff and a bunch of stuff in Swedish, which I don't know what it translates to off the top of my head, but the lyrics for the song are this is all Norse mythology stuff. This is album Secret of the Runes, and this is the first song on the album because this song Ginnungagap, if I remember correctly, is like the nothingness, the void, from which the fires of creation sprang. So the song talks about references Ymir, and I believe the world tree is mentioned as well, Yggdrasil, or however you pronounce it. Lots of silent letters and stuff in the language, so I'm not 100% sure on how the pronunciation is, but that particular song is like a great opening to the album because it's just like it's sort of the creation story, in a way, and then the album kind of follows from there. I mean, you have tracks like Asgard and Muspelheim and stuff like that, and Vanaheim. So they're talking about I believe those songs particularly are representing the planes, I think, of the world. My Norse mythology is very rusty, but like Muspelheim and Asgard being kind of the central, the sort of I think the human city, but these other sort of outer realms, like Muspelheim and stuff like that. I don't know much about Vanaheim. I like there's a bunch of different Heims in the track listing for this record, but it's an album that I really highly recommend people get because it's a great intro to the band. It actually is funny because it doesn't have any of the people that are most associated with being the top tier players for Therion. There's no Mats on this record. There's no Lori. They were using primarily session singers at this point, and so when they toured, they had a sort of a front woman type person. Actually, I believe during this tour was when they had Sarah Jezebel Diva was on their touring group at this point. And then they had Martina, I think, prior to this, maybe even somewhat during this touring as well. So, like, when you look at some of those older videos from Wacken, you see Sarah, you see Martina, but they were really more for the touring side of things. There was not, I don't think, the cohesion that you got with, and I think the input in terms of how the music was made on the level that say like Gothic Kabbalah had that. And I know there's a very large divide, I think, in Therion fans between how they feel about Gothic Kabbalah versus their other material, because Gothic Kabbalah was certainly a more accessible album, and I think maybe intentionally designed to be more accessible to grow the band's fan base. And I think as a result, it's a really fucking good album. I think it's one of my top 20 albums, I would say, in metal, and probably my favorite Therion album, although I really did like Lemuria's Series B, because it's a double album, so it has an unfair advantage, but there's such a huge, widespread cross-section of music represented there. From more traditional metal songs, like Uthark Runa, to songs that are kind of like sort of a hybrid, like a Abraxas is a real hybrid song. In some parts, it sounds very much like a traditional metal song, but then you have like this really crazy end section with this just thundering double bass section, and it's all like choir, but it's like it has the double bass on it. It's almost very reminiscent of like Demon Borgir or something like that. And it's interesting because that actually brings up the other figure who is very prominent in their sound, and I believe is still very prominent in their sound, who's been with the band for a while, but I think is kind of a real, some people really like him, some people don't, and that's Snowy Shaw. Snowy obviously was involved in Demon Borgir and stuff like that, and he has a very commanding presence on stage for sure. Like you saw him here at several points, sort of taking the lead. But the band had a very, very shared presence in terms of their. There's not really one front person. They all took turns. Of the four that you saw on stage, I think the one that really was sort of the background person was Katrina, and she sort of kind of hangs back a little bit. But like Lori is the one who's really front and center, along with Mats and Snowy, and they sort of all rotate around, in terms of their vocal parts and stuff. And I think that's really the thing about when you look at some of their later albums, particularly Gothic Kabbalah. A lot of it was very heavily geared towards the interplay between Mats and Lori. And I think some people thought maybe that it sounded too much like Nightwish or something like that because of that single male vocal, single female vocal interplay, right? But if you listen to, and I think a lot of that is sort of shot down by the fact that one of their most incredible songs, and I think most of their fans would agree one of their most incredible songs was Adaruna Rita Vivia, which is just this epic masterpiece, and features everyone, and everyone sort of gets their chance to shine. And in fact, I would say if anything, Mats is featured very little in that song. He's only in a couple of sections of that song. Lori is probably the one that gets the most shine in that particular song, along with Snowy, actually. So, I feel like, they get a lot of, flack, I think, for Gothic Kabbalah, but I really feel like it was an amazing album. This song, like I said, I love that middle section. I love the very sparse, music intro, where you have Lori's incredible soprano stuff, and then you kind of go into the more choir section of the song, and hearing that live is just unbelievable. There's such an incredible live experience that it's so difficult to have that many singers be that perfect in a live setting, and they're just flawless. The band is so flawless live, and I know that they, in recent years, that has not been the case really. But both times that I saw them, they were. I've definitely seen some live videos from Wacken after, particularly after Matt's left, and after the Neiman brothers left, and I feel like maybe that's sort of, there's not, the band isn't as tight as they were, the times when I saw them, because you still had Laurie and you had Thomas, and Thomas gets a ton of flack, but he's really a good singer. His voice is just tonally very, very different from Matt's, and he is like, he's the lead guy for the band. So I mean, it's not like he's not like a background guy. He's the lead person, and he's got a very strong vocal. It's just that it's a very different vocal from Matt's. Matt's was a more of a traditional metal singer, and I love his voice. And I imagine my surprise. 3 years ago, I went to see Trans-Siberian Orchestra down here, and as I go see them every year, and who would come out and sing Christmas Nights in Blue but Matt's freaking Levin? I couldn't believe it. He's been with them since then. Like every time I've seen them since, he's been on the tour. He always sings Christmas Nights in Blue, and I think he sings on This Christmas Day too. But he's got a couple songs that he sings on, and he really does, because he sings with a lot of distortion, and I'm by no means a vocal, like I can't really sing, but from the time that I've been spending with musicians and stuff like that, I kind of know a little bit about singing. And he uses very heavily a lot of vocal fry on top of his clean vocals and stuff. So there's like, he's got a lot of distortion in his voice and stuff, and it's really cool. So he tends to sing stuff like Christmas Nights in Blue, which is kind of like got like a raspy quality. The original song, I don't know who did the vocal for the original album version of the song, but it's got a ton of like sort of like bluesy grit all over it, and he does a really great job of singing it live. On the East Coast tour, that song actually features Sir Russell Allen from Symphony X. So it's funny that you've got two legendary metal singers, on both of the different touring companies for Trans-Siberian Orchestra. So it's a neat little trivia fact. And if you've never seen TSO live, I really do recommend them, because it's not, a lot of people think that's Christmas music, but it's a really fun show. And a lot of metal too, because they do a lot of Sabotage stuff, particularly late in the set. They do a lot of the heavier stuff, the like the Beethoven stuff, and the Mozart stuff, which is heavier. They do a cover of The Mountain from the Sabotage Hall of the Mountain King album. So they do, and some other stuff from from Sabotage and stuff. So there's a lot of cool little nods to their history. It's a lot for I think for fans, people who have been fans of the band since the beginning and know sort of the history and where they came from. So, but getting back to this record, this is a really great album, really great song, and the way the story is presented, I think a lot of people don't necessarily look at Therion as a band that's focused so much on lyrical content and on story. But one of the things that I loved about Secret of the Runes was how it really told a complete story. And I think that's one of the great things about this song being, the first song on the record, and really sort of providing an intro to what this whole album is about. And also sort of a lot of the focus of the band being balancing Gothic, a lot of heavy Gothic elements, and later on, Chris has a strong fascination with steampunk, right? So that becomes a heavy influence at various points throughout their career. But this album was really heavily mixing the Gothic and the classic symphonic elements that Therion has been known for, but also some of the heavier elements. What really isn't there is some of the stuff from the earlier albums where you had influences from black and death metal, which has really kind of fallen away. And they did bring some of that back for Lemuria had a couple of songs that featured death metal vocals. Typhoon featured all death metal vocals from Chris, and Three Ships of Brevik, I believe, also featured in part some death metal vocals. So there were certain songs on there where you had a greater mix, and that's one of the reasons why I like those two albums a lot. Maybe they're the best Therion albums overall. I think you could definitely make that argument because they're the most diverse albums I think that they put out. So, but musically speaking, there's not a ton to talk about here because it's not a super complex song. The middle part of that song is very difficult to play. It's very fast, and it's a complicated lead section. It's not a solo per se, but it's a harmonized lead section that's very fast and very tricky to play. And it's got that really crushing heavy riff that leads up to it, and then after that section you have that another a variation on that same riff that's another crushing heavy riff leading into the sort of Swedish section that closes out the song. So yeah, that's really it for this song. It's a great song, an incredible band. If you've never checked out Therion, I really would recommend looking at them and kind of digging into their catalog because they have a ton of different stuff to present from their earlier stuff, which is if you really like death and black metal, there's a lot to like there. Theli as a record had a lot of stuff like that, and from kind of Woven on, they started to really go more into the symphonic and Gothic element to their sound and sort of leaving the black and death metal behind. So they would try and recapture that later because three of the core members from the band went and formed an incredible side project with the guys from Soilwork called Demonoid, and I will definitely 100% be doing a Demonoid song in the near future. They are an incredible fucking band that only unfortunately did one album, but it was a masterpiece of an album, especially if you like melodic death metal with a heavy thrash influence, because that's what it is. So we'll probably be doing the next song will likely be Witherfall a little bit later tonight. It'll probably go up late tonight, early tomorrow morning, whatever. So keep an eye out for that. This is Calendros out. Stay metal.